Good morning, AIA and friends. Welcome to day 2 of Designing for Dignity, AIA LA's discussion on the housing crisis that challenges our city. I'm Wade Killefer, partner at KFA Architecture. Yesterday's session was so uplifting and powerful, thanks to Michael Lair and his very thoughtful team. It's evident that our real problem is not homelessness, but the rupture of the social contract between us citizens. But we architects, builders, and public officials need to pick up the pieces best as we can. Today, we're taking a different approach by looking at housing solutions that fall outside the usual apartment buildings. Due to the passage of Measures H and HHH, 6,000 permanent supportive housing units are now in the process of being completed, generally in projects of about 100 units. We're not talking about those projects today. This morning, Roger Sherman will present a unique approach and product that he and Gensler are promoting. John Malloy will explain his hub concept for mega developments. Prophet Walker will discuss his co-living projects. Daphne Kaplan will clue us in on advances in modular housing. Thea Trindle will discuss Mayor Garcetti's proposals to increase the housing stock. And I'll show some shelter and dorm solutions. They'll briefly introduce themselves now. Roger, why don't you go first?
Hi, I'm Roger Sherman. I'm design director at Gensler, and I run a small, as Wade alluded to, a small group of folks in a permanent supportive housing initiative, kind of think tank.
John Malloy.
Hi, I'm John Malloy. I'm CEO of Flexible PSH Solutions, Inc. And we're a small nonprofit that focuses on the construction of permanent supportive housing for the formerly homeless.
Prophet. Prophet, are you on?
He's muted. Prophet, you're muted. He may have walked away because he's in a bit.
Daphne, go ahead.
I'm Daphne. I am the founder of CASSETTE.
Thea?
Hi, thanks Wade. I'm Thea Trindle. I'm a planning and development manager for Mayor Garcetti's Office of Economic Development.
Okay, so let's kick off our program. Roger, you're up.
Great. Thank you, Wade. I'll just wait for the first slide to come up. I've got a lot of images to show. It's only of one project, but there's a lot to talk about in just the 10 minutes we have. Basically, the backstory for what I'm going to be showing you, which is a project called Urban Awning, was really our frustration over the 3.5, 4 years that we've been working in the permanent supportive housing field in trying to drive the cost and time occupied in developing and producing both affordable and permanent supportive housing. I'm sure that that is really the prevailing topic of Design for Dignity. We decided at a certain point through a series of conversations with Rob Jernigan and Tom Gilmore and the Carpenters Union and the Mayor's Accelerator for America that we had become a cottage industry that was based upon basically, in a way, if you will, sucking at the nipple of public funding. In a way that was going to make it impossible to bring down the cost because those policies came with strings attached that in turn affected regulations that made units in a way kind of not really as efficiently constructed as they might. And while there is great promise for modular construction, we felt that there were a whole host of things that really needed to be rethought. And so in effect, what I'm going to be showing you is what I call a kind of case study program 2.0, whereas the first case study program looked at the problem of the single family home and how it could be built more affordably. We are looking at this project as initiating a different type of case study program, which looks at the problem of bringing down the cost of housing, multifamily housing. So we started by actually thinking really about the ranch home. Do I just ask for the slides to be advanced?
Yeah, Roger, I have the slides up on my screen, so just
okay. So next slide, please. Thank you. Ranch homes like Cliff May really were conceived around the idea of trying to take advantage of the Southern California climate, which is not just a matter of lifestyle, though that was really a feature of the original case study program. What we came to realize, or at least question, was why in the world in Southern California with such a permissible climate, we're not building in a way that is more intelligent with respect to finding savings in the ability to actually live indoor and outdoor without a host of expensive mechanical systems and frankly circulation systems that are borrowed from other typologies from the East Coast, enclosed hallways and so on. So we very much brought the spirit of the case study program with us in terms of thinking about this project, as you'll see. Next slide, please. So urban awning is something that not so much, it really fundamentally rethinks from the top down how one might build most affordably multifamily or permanent supportive and affordable and even workforce housing by really understanding ways of staying beneath the radar of the building code and trying to do things more cheaply. I'm going to talk about the various elements of those as we go along. In that sense, what it's resulted in is something that is not your typical 4 or 5 story project, but actually a new type of density, which meets the same density criteria per bed as larger buildings, but is actually only 2 stories high. Next slide. Urban awning refers to the idea that there's a large roof, like as you saw in the Cliff May house, a very large roof that overhangs, which we call the awning, that covers in effect all of the housing and takes care of shading a micro environment, also takes care of rain, sheltering the building underneath it from rain, and also at the same time provides a collective open spaces, communal open spaces for the residents, and also brings with a kind of a solar panel and energy for the project on one side of the pitch. Underneath it, there are smaller buildings within the building, which are comprised in section typically of 3 units: a townhouse unit that you see on the left, a loft unit that you see on the upper right, and then a flat unit which you see on the lower right, with a service corridor that runs behind and under them as well. These units range from 175 square feet up to 350 square feet for the townhouse. And notably, as you'll see, they have a minimum of living space or dining. They really effectively have just a convertible space for sleeping, for bathing, and for a little kitchenette, squeezing most of the space out of the unit. If one is really thinking about the fact that people are coming from a tent, this is a considerable step up, and at the same time addresses questions of loneliness by providing means naturally and in a post-COVID environment healthily to congregate with others in the out of doors, but under the shelter from rain and from sun. Next slide. For those of us of a certain age, and I think probably Wade and Michael know this project. It's long ago forgotten, but it was one that I remembered from the 80s, was by Brian Murphy. It's in Topanga Canyon. He had this idea of building a big Butler building roof with all the rooms of the house basically underneath it that were taken care of in terms of sun and shade, and enabled them to be built very inexpensively. Urban awning is not dissimilar, except it's applied to a multifamily typology. Next slide. Don't have a lot of time to go through this, but we did extensive research together with Alan Locke from AEI, designing this specifically so that it would work without any air conditioning, all times of the year, and virtually with no heating. We do have a minimum amount of baseboard heating for the units, but through a variety of different means, it basically is almost entirely passive. And it also takes advantage of the ability to move throughout within your unit to higher and lower locations as options for sleeping in colder winter months where you can sleep up in the loft where it's warmer, you can control the amount of ventilation that comes through the unit, and so on and so forth. There are large fans which are under the big awning roof, which provide external convection outside of the units as well. These are sprinklered, but beyond that, most of the other technology that's assumed to be included in most other projects is not necessary here, leading to a considerable savings in cost. I should say that this has just been costed at a very detailed level by Cumming, and it's coming in at half the cost of a typical single-family, a typical affordable housing or permanent supportive housing unit, which right now are running about $300,000. This is coming in at just under $150,000. This is using panelized construction. Next slide. These are a couple of the units. This is the loft unit on the left, which is actually on the second floor, and the townhouse unit on the right. You can see this is with the bigger roof taken off. So you're looking at a translucent corrugated ceiling, which enables, again, you understand the units do not have to be weatherized because they're under the big awning, and we do live in Southern California. There are step ladders that go up. Those, we worked on the semantics of that in order to get the building apartment's approval. We're using things like Dutch doors and shutters with windows to enable people to modulate the heat and the ventilation in their own units. And they have and as I mentioned, they're only two stories high, which enables us not to use elevators at all, just ramps. Next slide. This is the way that they look. They would never be seen in isolation like this, but these are just, this is the unit on the left that has the a kind of a sort of piece of a porch over the lower floor, and this is with the porch taken off, looking into the unit a little bit through a kind of X-ray view of sorts. Next slide. Through a lot of support that we received because we were working with the Carpenters have a training center in Las Vegas that works creating and fabricating steel stud prefabricated panels. The Carpenters actually built the prototype full scale in their factory floor. It's there to actually visit, just adjacent to McCarran Airport. And the mayor, along with six or seven of the city council, Miguel Santana, and the governor's Department of Housing, went to visit. We took them on a tour of the units, which they had worried were going to be too small. And upon actually visiting them, because they have higher ceilings and so on, we're actually astonished at how livable and actually kind of cool they were. Many of them are making remarks about how their own sons and daughters were living in apartments that were much larger and much more expensive in rent than these units. Next slide. We're using a variety of different types of recycled materials within the units to differentiate them from one another. Next slide. This is one of the council people kind of touring through the loft unit. So to the right of the step ladder is the way into the bathroom. We actually even use the cavity between the studs as storage material. Very Japanese kind of approach. You can see the ceiling fan that controls ventilation and the clear story window up at the top of the loft, which is when necessary just called a storage area, in order to allow for ventilation outward and exhausting, along with the corrugated fiberglass ceiling that allows for natural light to penetrate so that you don't need to use a lot of energy keeping the lights on. Next slide, please. That's an operable bed couch. When you put the units all together, they look like something like this, which is for a site in Wilmington that we're exploring with Buscaino's office. It's a kind of a Y shape. This is the awning, the big awning roof you're looking at, with flaps that open. They're fixed, but it's a wood superstructure. There are solar panels on the back side of this roof and the corrugated fiberglass on the front side that you're looking at right here. One of the things that we like about this very much is the fact that it does in fact resemble a ranch house. It's just a very large ranch house and has a kind of domestic appearance that we feel would be responded to very well by NIMBYist opposition because it has a kind of compatibility with the single family character of the neighborhoods where a lot of these sites are located. Next slide, please. With the roof pulled off, this is now you're looking at the solar side up at the top. You can see the 3 buildings that sit underneath it with the slices that I had showed you in more detail below. Mostly it's a permeable ground surface with pavers. There'd be a gray water system that AEI has developed, collected from the large roof. The foundation system for the buildings, I can't get into this right now, is all a kind of waffle slab sitting on grade. So on even contaminated sites, we would be keeping all of the site utilities within about 2 feet of depth, enabling contaminated sites to potentially be put into play for where this could go. Next slide. Next slide. This is a section showing, kind of reconnecting what I showed you at the beginning, which is the cut through the units with the way that it relates to the awning, the big awning roof above, and the way that that might appear to the street frontage. Next slide, please. And then a few views of those communal spaces, or one view of the communal spaces where people would congregate together with picnic tables and various other things as kind of a large community living room. There you can see some operable panels above where things could be lowered to adjust for sun and for wind. Next slide, please. And again, recollecting Cliff May, the kind of spirit of Cliff May, living again in a multi-family context. Next slide, please. What I'm now going to show you is just a few slides concluding about one of the things that we've started to find in actually applying this to a set of circumstances, because it was a concept project. We're talking with the County of Los Angeles about a large-scale application of this of 340 units. This would be 3 urban awnings for 3 different populations that range from permanent supportive up to workforce or young professionals. That would be at the Ranchos Los Amigos, where they have a very large site. You can see that those legs begin to kind of form areas of open space that could vary from a rose garden to an orchard to a community garden and various other functions. Next slide, please. The roof could also extend to be used as greenhouses for growing what's called horticultural therapy for those who were homeless, recently homeless. Next slide, please. And then we began to realize that the greatest efficiency of the model was actually not as a brand new ground up building, but as a form of adaptive reuse. In this particular case, this is for a 1-acre former aircraft hangar at the Salvation Army's headquarters in Bell. Next slide. This is a view. The cost would be knocked down to approximately $100,000 per unit, which is what it's costing to build emergency shelters right now. So why not build permanent supportive housing if you're going to do it for $100,000 a unit? This is the upper level walkway along the units, and the roof and bowstring trusses belong to the original hangar. We're simply peeling away the roof in order to enable sunlight to come through with the corrugated fiberglass, and in other places we leave the roof and just put the solar panels on it. Next slide, please. And then the last application that I'm going to show you is at the Fairplex in Pomona in the horse barns, of which there are 9. This could accommodate approximately 600 people in these no longer used horse barns, where we're not able to get the full section of the building in there, but we're using the roof in a similar way. And you can see a kind of reduced section in the middle through the units in which we're only using the flat and piling it up as well. Next slide, please. This is a view into one of the horse barns looking at those units kind of installed within. I think, again, in the post-COVID environment, both the adaptation of use or reuse, as well as the more extensive use of outdoor spaces which are covered, nominally protected, really is an advantage that we seldom take enough advantage of today in our climate. And I think that's the last slide. I do have a short animation if there's time to show it, but if not, I will yield the floor back to Wade.
Is it easy to run the video, or?
I will ask, I guess that's a question for Will or whoever's the controller. I sent it to you guys. I have it on my own screen as
Right.
well.
Why don't we wait and we'll do it at the end?
Okay,
Because I think there's another video too.
great.
John Malloy, you're up.
I think that's a good idea.
Thank you, Wade. I was thinking today about why I got back into the business after retiring a couple of years ago, and the only thing that I could tell you is that I was down in Texas, in Austin, Texas, where my granddaughters are living, and I kept on reading about the issues that the city of Los Angeles was having with getting enough housing built for the homeless. And even with their tremendous Proposition HHH bond issue, there's been problems in delivering the promised number of units. And I thought that I had some ideas left in me that could play out potentially well for helping the city in its efforts. And so I came up with this idea that we're gonna go back to the redevelopment ways that have been lost in California since the demise of the redevelopment agencies about 10 years ago. But the idea here is to get some areas where you can build enough housing to make a real dent in the overall numbers. The city has a wonderful program where they go out and they have developer selected sites, which is better politically in many ways, because the city council doesn't have to step out and say, well, this is where we want the housing to be built. They can, at the end of the day, they can take shelter in the fact that the developer is selecting the sites. But the developer selected site scenario has a couple of drawbacks that I saw immediately. And one was that you get a lot of small projects, 40-unit projects. Half of the units would be for the homeless, and then half would be market rate or working poor rate units. And there would be this desire to lower the impact of the homeless population on a particular area by dividing up the projects between market rate and deeply subsidized homeless. And I thought that we don't have time for this. We really have to focus on the homeless units. And as you all know, there's enough brain damage that goes into a small project, and there isn't that much difference in the brain damage that goes in when you are doing a larger project, actually. And so I came back and formed a new nonprofit with a board that I had known the people who were on the board for quite some time, and they had the same ideas as I did. They wanted to make a real dent in the number of units that's being proposed. And so our first project that Wade Kilfer has so well designed here is a project that we're calling Enlightenment Plaza. And it was on the site of an old AT&T corporation yard near Beverly Hills, Vermont, in just outside of downtown Los Angeles. And it's a 2-acre site, but it's large enough to accommodate 4 projects. And we're going to do 330 units in the total project site here. And it's in what we're calling a hub area, which is housing underway without being blocked. The hub area concept is one that I've been promoting for the city to choose some areas where it thinks that permanent supportive housing would do well in the community. And these are areas that are going to be not intrusive into surrounding neighborhoods, areas that frankly are going to be formerly commercial or industrial in nature. And they're going to be areas that have transit nearby, such as this project here does, which is the Enlightenment Plaza project. And it is within walking distance of the subway.
John, you want to show another slide?
Yeah. It's within walking distance of the subway portal. And so anyway, I had come up with this idea. Go back to that one. Wait. I had come up with this idea of the city designating certain areas for hub site development. And the idea would be to do select certain very small areas within the city that could accommodate maybe 1,000 units, which would be units that would supplement the scattered site approach that's been the city's traditional approach. And we added one natural hub area that was going to be at the VA on the west side. And we also know that the LA Family Housing has been focusing on an area up north in the valley, and that would be a logical place to put a hub. And the downtown area had its Skid Row projects, and Skid Row is an area that frankly is going to be a hub area for homeless populations for years.
Show the next slide, please.
Go ahead. And so we have set about to create the first hub area, and that's in an area right here near Beverly, Vermont, which is going to be 330 units of our housing built right across the street from the existing PATH complex, which is located right off Madison Avenue and Beverly. And the complex there would have, as you can see on the slide on the left there, the new Enlightenment Plaza project would have its four projects arrayed around a Central Park area that would be available for all the folks in that hub.
Next.
And including the existing PATH project. And the new projects would be able to share some facilities that would result in reduced cost for the project. And we had set a goal of building each unit for not more than $450,000, which was, hold on that one. But we wanted to keep the cost down to $450,000 a unit, which is still a tremendous amount of money, I know, for a small single, efficiency unit, but is far less than what had been becoming the norm here, which was $600,000 a unit for the same type of stick-built units that were being generated from the scattered site program. And so we decided that we were going to go modular in there, and we're going to take advantage of the economies of scale that would be there to use some joint purchasing between all four of the projects. And there are a number of efficiencies that can be achieved in the operations by using joint briefing rooms and joint communal areas where people could congregate, and we wouldn't have to replicate them on a project by project basis. We could do it once for the entire project area. And so
we want to move on to this one.
yeah, this is a second hub area that we've envisioned down in Skid Row, and it is a project which would take advantage of the existing Weingart facility that is located just to the left of the block there. The super block area that we were focused on is the area between 7th and 6th. And it would also include the area between San Pedro and Crocker. And that super block area is an area that is right in the center of Skid Row. And it's ground zero for the problems that are facing us down there. And we would get something like 1,500 units on this block. And this is another one way you can go back to the Skid Row one. This hub would take advantage of the existing developments that are being proposed by Weingart at the corner of 6th and San Pedro, and would build upon those to do an entire city block where we could achieve the same kinds of efficiencies in service provision facilities and other types of joint use arrangements, including parking, and save money on a larger scale basis. Now, the question that we face all the time is, how are you going to manage these projects with so many homeless people all in one location? And our experience on that has been that we have always used architecture as the lead element in our projects. And our projects have been projects which have been the nicest looking facilities in the areas where we've located them. And we haven't had a lot of
Slide, please.
We haven't had a lot of problems with impacts. And so our belief is that we would be able to coordinate in these hub areas and get sufficient services in there to mitigate against the fears of having too many people in one location. And there would only be 5 or 6 of these areas around the city. So they would be all areas that would be chosen for their qualities of non-intrusiveness and transit-oriented development. And this is a hub area that we have envisioned on a site that I think is the most exciting site for the possibility of locating a significant number of permanent supportive housing units anywhere in the city, or for that matter, the county. And I've looked at sites all over the county. And this site here is one that Wade has done up a site plan for, but we could fit 1,200 units on one site here. And it's also a site that has an existing warehouse complex on it that could be used for interim housing while we get the funding developed for the construction of the 1,200 new units that we would put on the site, but we would use modular concepts and joint planning of the services facilities, and we would even have a small downtown or central area there, which would be, we could provide retail as well as service provision facilities there in the center of the complex. And
John?
we could do it.
I got to move you on because we got 4 more people.
Okay.
As you all can imagine, John has got could have had plans to use up all the Measure HHH funds and house 6,000 people himself, which is pretty amazing. So now, Prophet, I think you're up.
Awesome. Hey, everyone. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Treehouse. And a big part of what we do is look at housing from a multitude of angles. The first of which is, how do we build community? I think our world, as we see the changing in society and the sort of tide of society, we're watching a significant amount of people end up in isolation from one another. And one of the greatest issues I've personally experienced with the homelessness crisis, to me, is that we continue to create others out of people. I remember growing up in Watts and impoverished myself. And all the people there that were homeless, we all sort of looked out for each other. And if they were homeless, we provided a space for them to live, etc. But that was the result of people actually knowing one another day to day and having community. And so Treehouse, in so many ways, is first focused on community. The second is building something with greater density such that we can create greater accessibility and affordability. Can we actually go to the next slide? And so building community, and then the affordability, we build these 5 to 6 bedroom flats in some instances. And as a result, we're able to rent them out for 15 to 30% below market studio in the area. And that's without any government subsidies, that's without modular, but I'm most excited with modular. And the other thing that we do is provide different services within the building, because community is difficult enough, and there's some things that we're just better at as a company. And so we help provide those services. And the entire building, about 25-30% of our entire building is actually amenity space that we very thoughtfully thought through. What are the spaces that people will actually use to create serendipity and connection in their lives? Can we go to the next slide? Next slide, please. And one of the things, so I think we all know this, that just the rising cost of construction has really outpriced a lot of people, but people are still flocking to urban environments. And Los Angeles in particular is a place that is sort of a sprawling suburb, but without coming into neighborhoods and building, very large projects that are oftentimes costly, we were able to build our project on an 8,500 square foot lot, and it houses about 70 people. And everyone has their own bedroom and bathroom and some studios. And it's an incredible amount of density as well as dignity. This is pictured a dining hall in the building where weekly Sunday dinners occur. People come together and eat together. Having grown up poor and then interacted in different spaces throughout my life, I'm a big opponent to concentrating poverty. I really believe that to help the matriculation of individuals out of poverty, you actually have to combine socioeconomic stratus. And so in our building, we have both affordable units as well as market rate. And you know, the affordable units are, it costs an individual as low as $200 to $300 a month. But their unit, their interaction, the community dinners, etc., are no different than anyone else, and it's fully integrated, and all the neighbors know one another. Can we go to the next slide? All of our neighbors both know one another, pick one another in the housing space, and what we've seen also through this process is that you know, as the numbers continue to widen, actually during COVID, this happened in our building. Some of the people lost their jobs, and there is a continued sort of widening of the rent to income gap. But because everyone lives in community here, people actually began to really look out for one another and actually step up and support each other, because they were no longer these sort of faceless people in an apartment, but these were their friends and their neighbors. Next slide. So all this to say, I believe co-living is one of the solutions, not the solution, even though our slide says that. I appreciate modular and a host of other solutions, but I'm excited when co-living sort of meshes with modular and other forms of construction modalities, such that we can continue to bring down the cost while still upholding the dignity and people living together. Can you go to the next slide? And I'm sorry, the previous slide, can we go back actually? This is one of the units in our space. So every single person has their own individual AC, their own bathroom, and their own space. It's about 230 square feet. And it's soundproof from bedroom to bedroom, similar to how you would soundproof condo to condo. So again, your individual space is your sanctuary, but when you walk into the larger space, it's a larger home. Next space. This is just a treehouse picture. Our company is called Treehouse, and we have a physical treehouse in all of our buildings. The other piece of this is that we're building a connected brand. So much of the multifamily space is there is no brand identity, and I think what Treehouse wants to be known for is that if someone moves into Treehouse, they'll know that they'll connect with community. Yes, they'll have greater affordability and a high-end sort of experience at a accessible price. Next slide. And this is just some of our spaces. So this is an actual cafe in our first floor of the building. It's free to the residents. It's an honor bar. It's a pour over station that was very intentional to get people to sort of slow down and looking at some of the more, I think some of the Eastern practices of just slowing down, talking to your neighbors, connecting. And that was something that was important. Can we go next slide? Something we did was one of my favorite actual slides. When I grew up in South LA, we didn't have in-home laundry. We had laundromats that the kids sort of played in, and the parents worked, labored over the laundry. And so we decided to build this art studio that also doubled as a laundromat. And we wanted to see what people would do. Would they be more frustrated that they don't have in-home laundry, or would it become an enjoyable space? And on this side is when we staged it for photography. And the other two pictures is when the residents have now taken over the space. And they've added art supplies, et cetera, that we did not provide. And it's turning out to be just this beautiful, beautiful sort of show of community coming together and taking ownership of the space. And you know, you can go down here on a Friday night and have wine with your neighbors and do laundry. It's pretty spectacular. And during an age of COVID, when we're being pushed to be disconnected socially, this gives us an opportunity to actually still live in community with one another. Having your individual space, you can quarantine. Residents actually look out for one another and bring each other food, etc. We haven't had anyone was sick, but you know, there were a couple scares, and the residents just sort of jumped in and supported each other. Can we go to the next slide? Again, this is the dining hall. I'm actually sitting in this room here. It's a 2-story library where residents can come and read together, work together. There's a actual record player in here. And just the other night, you know, I think about 7, 8 residents sort of sat in the library and listened to old school records and just really had community and interact and really taken this building as the entire building as their home. You begin to see the roof. Can we go to the next slide? Oh, this is, again, more of the units, so you can get a feel of what they look like and how spacious and gorgeous, and I think with dignity they are. We can go to the next one. Again, this is the kitchen in each flat, so 3 to 5 people share these kitchens. And we provide all of the cutlery, the pots, literally everything you see in this kitchen we provide for people to move into. Next. And this is our rooftop deck, which our rooftop as well as the circulation of the building. We chose an outdoor circulation of the building where it feels like you're climbing through a treehouse, which that was really fun to do. And then when you climb all the way through the treehouse, you have the opportunity to have these sort of serendipitous interactions with your neighbors that are from all walks of life. Literally, we had everyone from someone who was formerly homeless to, you know, at one point the founder of Black Lives Matter, to NASA roboticists living here all under the same roof, which has been beautiful. And then they can go up to this rooftop deck. It's 2 sides, 2 different sides of the roof is what you're seeing. There's an outdoor movie screening area here where people can go to, and this is just sort of a fire pit, sort of hanging space. And our resident population that we found, initially the immediate reaction is that this is great for young people. Our average age actually is upwards of 32, 33 years old, and we have a span of young people. We have families that live here. We have older folks as well as the millennials. And for us, the sort of confluence of all these different generations, different races, different ideas, it's just so beautiful. We've dealt with you know, tenant issues that sometimes come up, and instead of sort of brushing them off as something not worth interacting with, we have a community manager that's here that's very supportive of resident issues, even down to what are our solutions for COVID. We have a resident app that's a resident app that deals with all our maintenance, et cetera, that crosses all of our buildings. We have a couple more buildings coming, one in Koreatown, Leimert Park, Culver City, and a few other places. And if you're a resident of one of our treehouse buildings, you're a resident of all of them. So you can interact in any of the common spaces throughout Los Angeles. Yeah, I think next slide, that may be it actually. Oh, and this just shows you some interaction in the actual community. This was pre-COVID, people coming together, a group of women. This is our actual gardening club on the roof that happens. It was down on the first floor of people hanging out. And then this is folks on the roof just sort of hanging together with one another. And that's Treehouse. It's really important for us to bring people together and connect people. At Treehouse, we accept Section 8. We really care about the diversity of the people that live in our space. We think that makes us stronger, and we think it makes the city of Los Angeles stronger long term as well.
Prophet, that's great. I think all of us can see ourselves living in a treehouse.
I hope so.
Daphne, you're up.
Hey, so Wade, I just want to be sensitive. How much time do I have? I can certainly run through quickly.
Just hit your 10 minutes.
All right. So Prophet knows I'm a massive fan of what he's doing. So much so that this next slide, that I included his chart on the left and sort of mine on the right, which is where I think our attempts are intrinsically linked, which is how the lack of productivity in construction over decades is sort of connected with some of the housing affordability issues we face. Next slide. We're attempting to hit the supply side of this at scale. Next slide. We're a for-profit company, but we have a social mission, and there is a philanthropic side to the business. Next slide. This is just a brief introduction. These are my partners. You may know, if you're in the modular space or have done anything in it, you may know Randy he was the founder of Rad Urban, which was one of the early entrants into the modular business up north in the Bay Area. And Nick's background has been in commercial cost and risk management. Next slide. We also have a stellar team in Korea. This is where we build our steel units. Next slide. And then we just holistically, our approach is to be making the industrialized product and then everything that it takes to actually make that successful in the project. So some of these services are also decoupled from our own products, and we do some of this in assistant to other factories, et cetera. Next slide. So I guess in general, what I want to throw out there, because I don't really want to talk about us so much as we've got a room full of people who can really influence whether or not this shift happens successfully and how quickly it happens. And so when I say this shift, what I'm talking about is something that I think a lot of us in this industry see, which is an inevitability around the transition of construction and building as a service to the productization of that service. And what does that look like? So next slide. So modular is a piece of that, obviously, the volumetric side. Why are we launching with that? Not because it's necessarily the only great way to make building more efficient, but from a US standpoint specifically, it is most consistently achieving game-changing results. Not without some stumbles, but when it works, it's quite amazing. And there's a lot of reasons I'll go into in a minute for why in the US it sort of makes sense right now. So next slide. Okay, so just for those in the room who may not be familiar with what I mean by modular, it's essentially a volumetrically finished unit that has its own structure to it in most cases. The one on the left is actually a bathroom module. That's more prolific, and part of that is that they're smaller and can transport more easily. So usually if you're building an entire apartment and you're putting it on a truck, there's a real limitation economically to the logistics of that. Next slide. So, and just to show, in Asia, there's a lot of type 1 modular that gets done. That's not so familiar in the US, but it's coming. Next slide. So it's not a pretty picture, but what I want to talk about here is that whole game-changing impact that I mentioned early. And the important thing about this is there are a lot of industrialized products and companies that are really focused on sort of improving the typology or the design or the structural connection. And all of those things are amazing. But if you really boil it down to what is achieving the scale of success in modular or any kind of industrialized product, it actually is 100% down to the process. And it seems like a very simple process, which is to say you're just literally parallel pathing two things at the same time, and you're getting this massive schedule savings if you do it well. But everyone in this room knows that changing a process in our industry, which is a very complex and layered ecosystem, is not as simple as it sounds. And so next slide, please. So I guess the point is that changing the design of what you make to make more sense on paper is important, but what's critical about that is that you design it in a way that actually supports the way that things get built today in the US. Tomorrow in the US, this may be a different picture, but when you change a process in our ecosystem to one on such a massive scale. So modular is an example where you have maybe 60 to 80% of what you built before is actually now being built off-site. You've got issues that now affect the financing side of that. So the lenders, it affects the procurement side, it affects how you design that so that a contractor, one of the 60 to 80 subs on site, actually knows how to integrate that new object with the thing that they've been doing for the last 100 years. So next slide. So this is sort of a back to basics. They might look a little like Legos, but the thing that I guess I would throw out there for the design community, and we're working with a couple of architects right now to develop what I would call kind of a bespoke catalog for that firm that is actually meant to go together simply on site. So think about design and how it's actually going to be implemented by the trades and their knowledge base, and also think about a factory in that what makes a factory efficient is building as many as possible of the same thing. So if you have, for instance, two different unit types, say a studio and a one bedroom in a building, the best way to reduce that bill of materials is to make that studio easily interchangeable as a half of the one bedroom apartment. So as minimum as possible. Next step. So, and this is just, I guess I'm getting a little more nerdy for the architects in the room. If you are putting two modules next to each other to try to make a bigger apartment, you have to think about the open space that you've now created between those two apartments and how that's going to be stitched together. So the most, the highest risk and the most variability in a modular project, once you've stacked it, is that now you've got trades coming into a unit that was finished in a factory and now possibly sanding drywall and painting and putting floors in where you have finished kitchens, etc. So it's just something to think about. We don't often think about the effect on a process that we don't understand, but since it's a new process, I would invite us to just rethink that. Next step. And then if there's any owners, developers in the building, procurement matters, and perhaps matters more than anything else. So you are the one who actually drives how this team is assembled and when this team is assembled. And again, if you're going to change a process, it's going to require a lot of behavior change, and that's hard. So think about procurement. Slide. And then just on a broader spectrum, I don't know everyone in the room. I don't know all of your job roles. I don't know all of what you're involved in. But if we're going to change this problem at scale, and there are some exciting tools with which to do that, modular is one of them, it's going to take a village, and it's going to take all of us willing to sort of rethink the things that we're used to doing every day and questioning whether we're going to have to change those things to be able to together do this process. Thank you. Next slide. No questions.
We'll handle questions at the end, yeah. Yeah, I do. I can imagine in 5 or at least 10 years, the inevitability of modular housing. Why aren't we doing it? It's better, it's faster, it's cheaper, and I think we all have to learn how to design within those parameters. Thea, you're up.
Great, thank you, Wade. So good morning, everyone. My name's Thea Trindle. I work in the Mayor's Office of Economic Development in LA. And in my presentation today, I'd like to talk about some of the things that the city is doing from a policy and development standpoint to cultivate an environment where we as a city can really push boundaries when it comes to the generation of new types of housing solutions from the bottom up. I think that our office and our departments want to ensure that LA is a city where we can be as bold as possible when creating and testing new housing ideas for the purpose of not only helping LA grow sustainably, equitably, and inclusively, but also just making us more resilient from a social, economic, and ecological perspective. And I just wanted to point this out because I think you'll find that my presentation is a little bit different from our other panelists. I really want to show what LA is doing to create the capacity, figuratively and literally, to test these new housing solutions, and then also what we're doing to help facilitate the implementation of some of these new ideas. So first I'll provide a little bit of context and discuss some of the dimensions of the housing crisis that we're facing. And then I'll lay out the framework for our office's housing agenda, and then finish off with some of our policy initiatives that are in implementation phase, and then also some of the things that we have in the pipeline. So just like I said before, highlighting some of the work that we've been cooking up, I thought I'd lay out some of the dimensions of the housing affordability and supply challenge. This graphic, some of you may have seen it before. It's from a PhD thesis that was done in 2013. And in essence, this graph really illustrates the fact that the city has a stunted housing capacity. Housing production in LA has not historically kept pace with our population growth. We don't have enough housing supply for our burgeoning population and economy. And a large reason for that, for our high cost of housing, is due to this limited supply of units. And you'll see here, it's not the only reason, but you'll see this steep kind of decline between the 60s and then the 80s, and then it plateaus right there. And in 1986, some of you might be familiar, Prop U was passed, which essentially cut floor area ratio in half across the city. So that kind of explains the plateau there. So the graphic on the left just shows what our development standards look like across the city. The city of LA has 467 square miles of land, and about 57% of that land is allocated for residential land use. However, 70% of that land is zoned for single family. So this just gives some insight into the capacity that we're working with right now. And so our lack of adequate growth planning in the LA region has left us with a limited housing capacity, and it's continued to exacerbate issues related to housing security. And this is a graphic that we like to use to illustrate the housing insecurity issue and the fact that it's much bigger than the kind of very visible, apparent houselessness problem that we see on the streets of LA. Visible houselessness from our perspective is really only the tip of the iceberg. And I show this graphic because when we talk about housing solutions, I think we should not only be thinking about bringing those who are experiencing houselessness inside, but we want to ensure that those who are housed don't fall into homelessness. And I thought it was really interesting. Yesterday, Heidi Marston from the executive director of LASA, she referenced, I think, an important stat from 2019 that despite the fact LASA was able to place 207 people into housing every day, still 227 people were falling into homelessness. So how do we address that issue? And that just illustrates that addressing the housing crisis, like I said, in LA, isn't about just taking care of this kind of iceberg tip. It's also about addressing the base. And so the stat on top there is from the recent LASA point in time count this year, and the stat on the base is something pulled from a recent report from the UCLA Institute of Inequality and Democracy. So that's the number of households at risk of eviction based on unemployment numbers. And I think that other colleagues of mine and in the planning department, I mean, you could estimate this number being much larger than what I'm showing based on kind of the number of households who are considered rent burdened in LA. And that's just a stat I'm pulling from a recent report. And so some of you may already be familiar with this information that I'm showing here, but essentially, you know, one of the tools that's utilized to address this great need we have is what's called in the state of California, the Regional Housing Needs Assessment Process. It's a state mandated process where the Department of Finance shares demographic projections with HCD, and HCD uses a very detailed methodology to turn those stats into our targeted needs for different regions in the state. And also by determining our needs by income category. So the RENIP process is something that's required. It's on an 8-year cycle. And as you can see, our number for this upcoming cycle is big. The allocation process is still taking place. We were anticipating having our final allocation in August 2020. Next month, but due to the delay in the approval of SCAG's regional transportation plan and their sustainable community strategy, it's looking like we might have our number more by the end of the year. But needless to say, it's still going to be a large number, and so we're going to have to really hone in on how we use existing tools at our disposal to provide the capacity needed to meet these targets. And so just to jump into what our office's housing agenda is and the principles that we use to guide the policy initiatives we want to advance, I'll start with the first prong of that agenda is really getting back to basics. We want the city and the development services that we offer to be oriented toward the objective of building and preserving homes to expand the supply of housing. And so this means streamlining existing city processes and clarifying existing programs and regulations. And I also think it really means utilizing and leveraging technology to better serve our customers. And one of the key indicators here, I think, is really just seeing the number of units that are being permitted in the city. In 2015, the mayor announced the goal of permitting 100,000 units by 2021, and we've hit that goal 2 years early. And we continue to see you know, record numbers of dwelling units permitted. And as you can see in the graphic in the bottom right there, we're seeing some of the highest numbers since the late 1980s. So just our team continues to track this very closely. Second, we have creating a city of opportunity and making sure that we have a robust housing safety net. So this really gets at kind of the issue I was talking about earlier, related to making sure we're addressing the base of the iceberg of our housing problem, and making sure we have a safety net in place that prevents those who are vulnerable to experiencing houselessness or falling into houselessness, that they, you know, we have a system in place that prevents that from happening. And so 2 targets here are something more recent, our Bridge Home Initiative, which sets out the goal of establishing 30 shelters across the city with over 2,200 beds. And then of course our permanent supportive housing pipeline, which also includes our 888 pipeline and getting permanent units up and running. And then third is we have building a city of the future and making sure we have equitable and sustainable communities. And this means creating more incentives for private development to provide affordable housing and create mixed income communities. It also really means capturing the value created through our public investments like our transit infrastructure for the purpose of varying anti-displacement efforts. And then, so just quickly here, these are 2 targets from LA's Green New Deal related to the number of housing we'd like to see built within transit over the next decades, as well as the number of units preserved over the next decades. And so now I just want to jump into some of the tools that we've seen that are already in implementation phase that have been really successful. So first, I'd like to just highlight accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, which I know we're all familiar with on this line. We think that ADUs have emerged as such an essential tool in the city's strategy to increase housing units, due largely in part to changes in state law that took effect in 2017. Just to kind of give you an idea of just the scale of ADUs in the city. In 2016, before the state law changes came into effect, there were just 117 ADU permits that were approved. And in 2018, we saw that number shoot up to over 4,000 permits issued. And furthermore, not just the sheer number of permits are an indicator, I think, of the success of the ADU program, but also ADU permits have actually been making up around 20% of our total housing permits issued in 2018 and 2019. And we've actually seen this trend even continue into 2020. We've had almost 6,000 dwelling units permitted this year, and around 1,500 of those permits were for accessory dwelling units. So continuing to see about a fifth of our dwelling units be ADUs. And so the graphics here, I just wanted to highlight, these are some really awesome metrics that you can play around with on the Department of City Planning's webpage. So that's the graphic here on the left. They've launched a new Power BI dashboard that's made a lot of this data, our permitting data, more accessible and user-friendly. And then on the right, just kind of showing the geographic hotspots of where a lot of ADU development is taking place, so you can see a good amount of units being permitted in the valley. And then also quickly, I just wanted to highlight an awesome program in the mayor's office, the LA ADU Accelerator Program, it's a tenant matching program that was launched in part from grant funding provided through the Bloomberg Mayor's Challenge. And it pairs older adults with homeowners willing to provide a stable home by offering their newly constructed or converted ADUs and affordable rentals. And in exchange, homeowners receive the benefits through the program of qualified tenant referrals, tenant case management, and then in turn, stable rental payments. Next up, I won't spend too much time here. I know we're all familiar with the city's Transit-Oriented Communities Incentive Program. This was a program that was delivered in part from the voter-approved measure JJJ. The program essentially allows increased density, floor area, reduced parking requirements based on proximity to transit and the number of affordable units that a project will be hosting on site. And the majority of TOC applications can be approved by right ministerially, but there are cases that go through a discretionary process. And the reason I wanted to just highlight this here is we see this as a successful tool, not just in the fact that it's been helping to deliver more housing and expand our supply of housing, but also in that it's really helped to increase the number of deeply affordable units that we're seeing built on site at projects. So historically, we've had trouble increasing our numbers of extremely low income units. And about 20% of the units proposed, at least through the discretionary TOC projects, are affordable, and 37% of those affordable units are extremely low income. So just highlighting the success of this program and its ability to deliver our deeply affordable units. And so next here, I wanted to just go over some of the things that we do have in the pipeline that I think will be, there will be coming announcements in this year and early 2021 around. So first we have our housing element update. As many of you probably already know, the housing element is a state mandated component of our general plan that we align with our RHNA cycle. So the goal of the housing element update is to propose new tools and programs that can be utilized to meet those RHNA targets I was talking about earlier. In essence, as part of the housing element process, LA must demonstrate to the state that there is available capacity for the units that have been allocated to the city. And right now our outreach for this is in full swing. Our citywide policy division in the planning department has been convening our housing element task force and continued to engage stakeholders even during our COVID-19 public health crisis through a range of virtual settings and convenings. And draft concepts will be available to review and comment on this fall. So I really encourage everyone who's participating today and in this conference to keep an eye out for that and review those concepts and provide comments accordingly. Next is our Downtown Los Angeles Community Plan, and I wanted to highlight this community plan effort for a couple reasons. First, it's going to be the first community plan to launch that's going to be using our new zoning tools that are proposed through the RECODE initiative. And it's, you know, this is our first zoning code update since 1946. And so as a lot of you on the line know, we have a antiquated zoning code that we've been trying to work with for a long time. And this plan area is going to be the first one to use our new zoning tools. I also just wanted to highlight the Downtown LA Community Plan, because in terms of capacity, I think it's really going to deliver for the city. Under the proposed plan, 60% of downtown compared to 33% today will be eligible for residential uses. And this is in large part because the projected growth for the area shows that we're going to be accommodating in downtown 125,000 new people and 55,000 new jobs. And that's just to give some context around that, that's 20% of the city's population growth on 1% of its land area. So exciting things planned for the downtown LA area. A couple of interesting aspects that I'll also mention about this plan area is the elimination of parking requirements, tailored zoning for the Skid Row area that will actually only allow deeply affordable units and permanent supportive housing. And then also kind of a rethinking of our community benefits framework. And then third, the density bonus ordinance update. So our density bonus is it's a state program, but our local adoption of the density bonus provisions occurred in 2008. So this will be the first reform update since 2008. And outreach is expected to begin on this year. But I wanted to just highlight, you know, since its inception, density bonus incentives have helped create more than 31,000 housing units, and 10,000 of those are affordable. So this is a program that has been successful, and I think the intent of the amendments here is to make it even more successful in expanding our supply of affordable housing. So similar to the housing element update, I really recommend paying attention to announcements around density bonus and participating in the legislative process here. And then lastly, wanted to highlight a program from our Chief Design Officer, Christopher Hawthorne. Our office is really committed to better understanding the benefits of missing middle or low-rise scale housing, which includes accessory dwelling units and triplexes or even subdividing single-family homes. Not only as a mechanism for improving housing affordability, but also as a mechanism for wealth building among lower income and middle income Angelenos who own homes. And so with this in mind, we're in the process right now of seeking grant funding to launch what we're calling a Missing Middle Ideas Competition. And the goal is really to provide a national model for 3 to 4 unit housing that complements single family neighborhood contexts. And I think it's also really an opportunity, and Christopher Hawthorne has pointed this out, to execute kind of a redux of the really influential post-war case study program with a focus on multifamily instead of single family, kind of similar to what I know Roger was discussing earlier with the Urban Awning project, kind of reorienting what was done with that case study program towards multifamily. And especially given that 70% of the city's developable land, as I pointed out earlier, is for single family residences, I think there's a lot of potential in leveraging smaller scale, low rise housing. And then just to close, some of the more administrative initiatives that we have going right now really focus in on leveraging technology and streamlining key plan check services. And one of those that I think is really critical is our electronic plan check program. Building and Safety launched that last year. and for projects that only require building and safety review, and they're hard at work working with other development services departments to get other departments integrated so that we can have larger scopes of work be submitted entirely electronically, removing the need to have to go back and forth to our development services centers in person. I think that the COVID-19 crisis has really showed us what can be done in a really short period of time in terms of leveraging technology. And so we want to build on that momentum and expand even more what we can do electronically in terms of submitting applications, expanding online payment. So that's something that's in development. And then lastly, in terms of expanding what services and resources we have for ADUs, I've been working with our Chief Design Officer and Building and Safety on launching what we're calling an ADU standard plan program. Though still in development, the intention behind the program is to streamline approvals for and production of ADUs, while at the same time promoting high quality design and supporting emerging architects in LA. So in essence, it's similar to programs that we've seen launch in Seattle, San Diego, and San Jose, but it will allow a designer to submit plans to building and safety to be permitted. And then the designer will have the opportunity to upload a rendering onto building and safety sites. So similar to the standard plans that are available right now for like stairwells and pools, we're basically expanding that process to accessory dwelling units. So that homeowners who might not be familiar with the development process can kind of use building and safety's webpage to shop for designs that might make sense for their property, and then in turn work independently with the designer who then, because they had their designs permitted through the ADU standard plan program, can get an expedited approval. We're hoping over the counter with building and safety. And then lastly, this is something you may have seen the announcement about from Building and Safety. They're launching a new affordable housing section. So they've created a dedicated team of plan checkers who will specifically be working on projects that kind of align with our Executive Directive 13 and Executive Directive 24 priorities in terms of accelerating the permit approval for shelters and affordable housing where projects at least have 20% covenanted affordable. So that's it for me. I'm sorry if I went a little over time, but look forward to questions.
Thanks. The missing middle is that can really take off. I'm really excited about that. Good Christopher's initiatives going forward on that. So in my turn, we've done over 5,000 units of permanent supportive housing over the last 30 years, but I'm going to talk about alternative solutions instead. LA County's Housing for Health program and the Department of Health Services realized some time ago that they could reduce hospital and medical costs by housing potential patients before they became sick enough to require hospitalization. One pilot program called Safe Landing provides intensive services to those just off the street, stabilizing them until they're ready to be placed into permanent supporting housing units. Next slide. We looked at various underutilized county properties and found a piece in West Athens between 105 and Imperial off Normandy, right next to the sheriff's office. Next slide. The shelter will provide 178 beds, comprehensive health and mental health clinics, a full cafeteria with meals, employment and educational assistance, and give clients transition plans to go into permanent housing. Next slide. For both cost and the speed of delivery reasons, we decided to use prefabricated metal buildings like airplane hangars, Butler buildings from Butler Manufacturing, and working with Exodus Recovery, the service provider, we developed a rather complicated program for the site. Next slide. We have 5 one-story buildings. Whoops. We have 5 one-story buildings: an administration building, a clinic, a dining hall and kitchen, a woman and couples dorm, and a men's dorm. Next slide. While we were thinking about the buildings, Yam Krimsky at Perkins and Will was independently working on designs for sleeping pod, which they call domes. Next, please. They fit perfectly, and we hope to put them in our dorms. We're wrestling with costs right now. Next slide. So almost 60% of the square footage is taken by service uses, and 40% goes to the actual living and sleeping space. The forms are simple sheds, clad with metal, with a few pop-outs to announce entries or provide seating areas. Next slide. Safe landing is scheduled to break ground in a couple weeks. Due to the strain put on the county budget due to the pandemic, we're going through the obligatory value engineering right now. The construction cost is about $120,000 per bed, or looked in a different way, $50,000 per bed and $70,000 to pay for this, to service those beds. Next, please. It's obviously difficult to find land for shelters on the west side. The 3rd Supervisory District staff noticed that there are a lot of property around the West LA Armory that was not much used, and they reached out to the National Guard to see if they could make a deal. Using the same program from the West Athens shelter, we placed this new shelter in the northeast corner of the property and put a garage on Federal Avenue to replace the National Guard parking that we had displaced. Next slide, please. Conceptually, we put the 5 buildings from the West Athens safe landing site right on top of each other. The functions from the admin and clinic buildings are on the ground floor. Kitchen and dining are on the 3rd floor, and the dorms on the 4th and 5th floors. This scheme anticipates using prefab connect-stack steel framing system with CalWall and metal panel facades. Next slide. Here's a early sketch of a possible massing scheme. The project is currently being held up by the National Guard's concerns about blast force protection. They're afraid that somebody's going to come in and bomb the shelter. And also being slowed down by the county's budget drain from the pandemic. Stay tuned. Next, please. Homeboy Industries headquarters is on Alameda Street, where it crosses under the goal line north of downtown. Homeboy, founded and run by Father Gregory Boyle, is the largest gang and rehab re-entry program in the world. It provides training and support to formerly gang involved and previously incarcerated men and women. Typically, 150 of their members go through the 9-month training program at one time, and housing security is at a premium. Next slide, please. This phase master plan shows the program elements. Phase 1 in yellow is the dorm building. Next to it, phase 2 is permanent supportive housing for members that graduate from the dorms. Phase 3 is in orange is the daycare building, and phase 4 in red is the meditative chapel. The city is leasing the site to Homeboy for $1 a year. Next slide. This dorm building makes use of a concept our client gave us to gang 3 double-use bedrooms in front of 2 bathrooms and a kitchen. A community living room is centrally located on each floor, and that gives us 6 beds and 840 square feet, or 140 square feet per bed. In a way, this is somewhat similar to Profit's co-living buildings. Next slide. The ground floor has a gym, community room, and offices. Next. There are 37 beds on each of the floors above, 148 beds total. Next. And here's a conceptual early elevation. Next slide. On this aerial, you can see the site layout. Note the phase 4 reflection center in red on the corner of Alameda and Alpine. We were contacted by Mark Rios, who's designing a tram system from Union Station up to Dodger Stadium. They may want to anchor the 300-foot tall tram support pillar above our reflection center. So our little glass and steel jewel box may be 300 feet tall. That next slide. That'll be cool. Okay, next slide. Next one, there we go. And finally, here's our master plan for the VA campus, which will eventually house up to 1,600 formerly homeless vets over the next 8 years. In order to tie the disparate pieces of the campus together, we're proposing to link the major historical buildings together with a series of pedestrian axes. The Metro Purple Line Transit Plaza, off Wilshire in the lower right-hand corner of the plan, is connected to the chapel and then to the Wadsworth Theater, which is connected up to the Civic Center, through the Town Center, to the Clock Tower, and then up to the Wellness Center. This provides a coherent pedestrian path up through the campus. Each axis leads to another and another. The campus is divided into north and south villages. The quiet and introspective north village is orthogonal, with large open spaces, quads, promenades, and pedestrian streets and walks. Most of the buildings in the North Village are historic renovations. The South Village has centralized service spaces and a large central area. A majority of these buildings will be new construction. Construction on the first building, 207, will come later this year. Will, that's it for me. Will, do you want to go to question and answer, or how do you want to handle it?
Yeah, we have a question queued up from Stephanie Reich. And while she gets prepared to answer her question, just everyone, we're going to extend Q&A for about 10 to 15 more minutes. So we'll get to our breakout rooms at around 9:50 to 9:55 or so. So thank you, Wade, for the presentation. Stephanie, are you online right now?
Yes, I am. Thanks, Will. I typed a bunch of questions.
Oops. Stephanie, you muted yourself. There you go.
Hi, Corinne. Thanks. Thanks, Will. I typed a bunch of questions into the chat, so you can just choose whichever one seems interesting.
I can go ahead and read it for you. I think the one that Will was interested in was, I remember in the late 90s, early 2000s, SCAG did a project called the 2% Solution. You want to elaborate on that and that question?
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that was for Theodora. I was referring to SCAG's 2% Solution, which talked about how, when you mentioned all the construction downtown, the 100,000 units, it sparked my memory that it was an idea for densifying all along the boulevards to create housing. And that sort of feeds into the new zoning for the community plan. So I was wondering if that old plan has been dusted off, or is there a new master plan that you're working with?
Oh, that's thank you for pointing that out. I'm actually not familiar with the SCAG plan that you're referencing, but I think that in terms of, I think that the downtown LA community plan is not only kind of rethinking the current plans that we have in place. So the current plans that are in place are the Central City plan and then the Central City North. And so the idea is to kind of merge that under one comprehensive plan for downtown LA. And I think it's both kind of building off of what has been successful thus far in helping to enable more housing capacity in the downtown area, while also creating new tools that both create that capacity and also kind of orient that capacity to building out more affordable housing. And I think that kind of goes back to, I know I mentioned the community benefits, kind of rethinking of our community benefits program. So as some of you may know, right now we have a transfer of floor area rights program in the downtown area, and the community benefits program is kind of rethinking how that actually is implemented and directs, tries to direct more capacity growth towards affordable units. I hope that answers your question a little bit.
Thanks. I have some more questions for you. Maybe we could talk offline.
Yeah.
Yeah. just to remember, we can continue this conversation on Whova. You guys can set up your individual meetings on Whova as well. I'm going to call on Karina. You had a lot of questions throughout the entire session, and I see even one back from 8:37. Do you want to address any of your questions to the group?
Hi, good morning. Yes, I forgot like what my first question was really. Let me see. This goes back to the first presentation about the urban awning. And I was really excited kind of about this concept of putting a lot of the, the standard kind of uses of a living or of a dwelling outside. And I'm kind of, working with that concept as well. And I keep running up against issues where the building code still kind of requires all sorts of things to be inside, to be heated, to be cooled, composting toilets are a problem, gray water needs to be dual plumbed. And I just had a question about, I mean, I don't even know who I'm directing this question to, but I feel like the code oftentimes is really in the way of truly revolutionary ideas that we now know work, especially when it comes to sustainability. So maybe to the presenter of the first project, what has been your experience with that, or do you have any insights to share about that?
Sure. Yes, this is Roger. Several things. First of all, the two people that I know who have really spent a lot of time looking at these issues in general, not specific to urban awning, are Angie Brooks and Brian Lane from Koenig and Eisenberg. Both of them have compiled over the last 10 years a kind of hit list of items that they've continually come up against, and we've joined in with them to start pushing back on the city to start taking some matters up in order to amend them, because they're directly contributing to the increased cost of housing, and frankly they're just bad for design too. I mean, they have countless stories that they can kind of talk about, so I'll leave that to them. Will knows about this as well because AIA has been involved too, and when Will asked me what would be the one thing that AIA could do to really help out on PSH, it's this. It's basically really digging in against the city and getting them to actually act to change things, which would probably be a matter of bringing it before the city council and getting them to make some kind of amendments. There are a number of things which are related to federal law, such as ADA and money, and state law that the city cannot do much about, but there are a lot of things that they can, that they've layered over it. So that's a conversation, a longer conversation. But as far as urban awning is concerned, I'm right in the midst of all of this right now. We found that even with the pull that we were able to exert, that the building department does not, they're very reactive rather than proactive in trying to help you solve problems, figuring out a way to get to work around a lot of the issues. They'll simply state over and over again what the policy is as opposed to solving it. So what we actually discovered very recently was that we went to a code consultant who volunteered to work with us, who basically did have the capacity to be proactive. And I can give you one or two examples of that. A lot of this actually has to do with semantics. What a surprise. Something really stupid and easy. For instance, we gave a presentation to about 40 building officials at the city of the urban awning and asked them to critique. We had something very similar to this kind of Zoom meeting in which the chat room was filled with all of the problems that they were drumming up. One of them had to do with the ladders. And they said, oh no, you cannot do ladders. There's absolutely no way, blah, blah, blah. And so one of us asked, oh really? So when you built the shelter that had the tent and you had bunk beds and people had to go up a ladder, what was that? You managed to get that built? And they said, oh, well, that was a bunk bed. And we said, well, what if we just called this a bunk bed? And they said, oh, then it wouldn't be a problem. You could do it.
Awesome.
There was no change whatsoever to the design. It was simply semantic. Another one was they said, oh, your bathroom is right next to the kitchen. You've got a curtain there. That is illegal. And we said, well, okay, what if we put in a pocket door? Oh yeah, that'll do it. I mean, there's not even ability to just come up with a suggestion as to how you can kind of solve things. We also discovered that if we were not to call the kitchen a kitchen, but rather just an area where you could put a hot plate and one of those refrigerators that you used to have in college, then there are another set of things that get unlocked because it's not called a kitchen anymore. And so we're able to get through most of the issues actually with them by just working with somebody who knew the code well enough that they could figure out how to hack it. So there are ways to do it. It's just kind of a question as to which chapter and verse you want to cite in the code, and really kind of putting it in that way. It's a kind of form of design problem in and of itself. It's unfortunate that you have to work that way, but we're encouraged that there is a pathway. It's just that you don't look to the building department for the answers. You have to go to them with couched in the right ways.
Yeah.
Thank you, Roger and Karina.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to say, and I think that, just in the spirit of collaboration, I think that oftentimes the building officials are actually grateful if you point them that way, because they don't have the authority to make that suggestion, so it is up to us to be.
I think they're not against it. They're not against it. They're just not in the frame of mind of being able to figure out how to solve something. They can just cite what they know.
Okay, thank you so much, Roger. We're going to keep this moving because I do want to get a few more questions in before we split for the breakout sessions. So I want to go back to Prophet's presentation. We had a lot of great comments and questions in there. I know you guys have put in some new questions. I'll get back to them a little bit later. But one of them was from Valerie. I think it's a lot of top of mind. We all love the Treehouse project. Well, I'm assuming you do. But people are, we're wondering about the co-living evolving in the face of COVID. And if you can touch on that. And Valerie, if you want to unmute yourself to speak about that more, and Scott as well. But Prophet?
Yeah, sure. I can speak specifically about how it's evolving, and then if anyone has more directed questions, I'll answer those. I think for during COVID, there's sort of this initial thought that people would be less likely to move into a co-living situation. But what we have actually found is our highest lease-up rate has been during COVID. And I think for a few reasons. When I first started Treehouse, I was actually looking at, I had a lot of conversations with teachers, and I had LOIs from Teach From America and the teachers union to support and bringing teachers into the space and service workers, and in Los Angeles. And so from day one, we actually designed with individual bathrooms and individual AC units. We did not anticipate COVID at all, but there's a lot of sort of co-housing iterations that are far more communal and less conducive to a pandemic. Whereas our actual build out has been quite conducive, both from a physical safety standpoint, and then at the height of COVID, I remember the entire building, the community decide to just lock down as a community and still interact every day in the communal spaces, but just didn't go outside unnecessarily. And it became this pretty cool bubble where everyone sort of hung out and interacted with. And so it became a great space for COVID, frankly. And our building has a tremendous amount of third space. And so looking at, I don't think even in the face of COVID, people will stopped wanting to go to co-working spaces or coffee shops, etc. Our building just has those naturally.
Sorry, did anybody else have any questions following up with what Prophet just said? It's great to hear. No? Okay.
We have a question from Derek. Derek, are you on the line?
I am, yes. Good morning. It was a question for John Malloy and the people dealing with the issue of the mixed income versus the 100% affordable or permanent supportive housing. And I've heard in the past when I've researched this issue, mixed results on the question. I can see your motivation, John, to look for the hub concept and the pursuing things that are politically viable for meeting our incredible, you know, unhoused population challenge. But in terms of the final product that we're left with, you know, going into the future as communities and as, you know, stepping stones to becoming part of a society, what is the best goal, and does anyone have a contribution about that issue of mixed income versus 100% affordable housing?
Yes, I could tell you that from our perspective, we, having had all the experience that we've had in providing 100% affordable to the formerly homeless in our projects that we've built around the city so far, that there isn't that much difference between the people that are designated as chronically homeless with mental illness and other chronically homeless people, and that once you get them in and get them stabilized and into a program where they're focused on their own well-being, that you don't have the problems that many people otherwise attribute to these facilities. And that our experience is that if you create an environment there that is sufficiently conducive for open space and facilities that they can use, and if you create an environment there that is a loving environment where people can feel like they're being treated right and so forth, that there isn't the problems that so many people attribute to the low-income communities. And our project there at Enlightenment Plaza is going to be, we're going to propose taking over the streets within the project, and so there won't be any chance for illegal camping to be going on as there is now in that area. And so we're going to rid the environment of that and create an environment where people can just relax and enjoy their lives and be successful. And not everyone wants to be in a mixed income environment. And many of the folks there that we're serving are used to being around others that have had similar issues and problems that they have. And so we think that there's a wide variety of choices that can be made, but the hub concept is designed to meet the overall cost savings objectives and get enough units into a particular area to take advantage of the fact that that area has been designated that it's an area that can accommodate a significant number of low-income units.
Thank you, John. So now we're going to move on to, I'm going to introduce Craig Shimahara. Craig is going to share a video with us, and then after this, we're going to break into the breakout sessions. Craig?
Thanks, Corinne. Appreciate it. And thank you to the rest of the AIA Los Angeles and everyone on the call. It's been an amazing, inspirational couple days here. But we've learned a lot. And if you think about it, if if myself and presumably a couple of other folks here have learned some things and are excited about some concepts, how much more does the general public need to be made aware of all this? If you just are reading the LA Times, oftentimes I guess it's pretty dire out there, and it is. It's a dire situation, but there's very little hope that's projected, that's communicated. Yesterday, Sean Spear said that we, in addition to everything else we're doing, we need to be sharing our story better in order to inspire people and let them know that this good work that we're doing is actually making a dent, and there's reason to hope. So that's what we're doing. My wife and I are producing a nonprofit feature documentary entitled Architecture of Hope. And we are actively searching, as I said yesterday, to find projects and processes and policies that are invigorating and exciting to again, try to share these stories and collectively move the needle. So I'm gonna go ahead and share that. A trailer. Here's a teaser trailer for the film. Thank you.
My eviction began centuries ago with chains that in time hid themselves as rebar, stiffening the foundations, freeways, walls, ceilings, and doors which surround me, but offer only to shade the sidewalk where my laundry and television now wait like fatherless children. Now I measure the darkness. I study each footstep or whisper. Where you sleeping tonight, baby? My clothes sag and soil. My weight drops quickly, like your eyes as you rush past me. Like my eyes as I remember rushing past another. Now I'm the one who's cold and alone, bleeding in the street. How do I root out these chains which still hold fast beneath immaculate backyards that push me away? How do I get off the street with blurred eyes and a pain in my neck? Show me how to build a home I can half afford. I want to warm, I move to mend. Help me find heart and hope to rise above pavement and stone. How do I shelter at home?
So really quick, thank you again, AIA Los Angeles. If anyone is interested in learning more, please reach out to us through the website, architectureofhope.org. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks again.
Thanks, Craig. Okay, so just as a reminder, this is the time everyone goes to their breakout sessions that you probably have already picked. All the links are in the email that I sent out. Make sure you're going to day 2's links. They are different from yesterday. If you are joining breakout room 6, please just stay here in this room. This is breakout room 6. But other than that, and then also breakout room leaders, it looks like we went a little bit longer than 11:55. So let's everyone try to, sorry, I'm in a different time zone, 9:55. So let's try to get back here at 10:30, and then we'll reconvene again for more Q&A and wrap it up. But please make sure everyone comes back to this main room, this main Zoom link, so we can wrap up the day properly. Thank you so much.
Mark, I'm trying to find you on my screen. Hang tight.
Here.
All right.
I talk, you see me, right?
I gotcha.
Barbara. I think I saw you walking around behind Wade earlier in the background.
She's prompting me.
Yeah.
Hi, Wade.
You guys can get started whenever you're ready. You have 84 people
All right.
here. I know that a lot of
Okay.
people just stay in here, but yeah, I would get ready.
No,
I'm going to
that's
go off camera for just a minute, but
Sure.
oh, before that, I'm going to make you guys co-hosts just in case.
Okay.
Okay, Dana's going to take the lead and start
I
this
am.
today. And I'll share my screen so we have the info, and then just tell me where to scroll when you need me to, Dana.
Let's off for a second and we'll take notes. For everyone on the phone, my name is Dana Sales. I run a company called 360. We are land use entitlement, community engagement, permitting, and lobbying consultants. Extremely active in the affordable and permanent supportive housing space, as well as policy development, both at the city and the county level, and to move things forward. Streamlining, co-hosting this session with Mark Lehman from Lehman Architects, you wave. So our session yesterday focused on sort of public policy obstacles for innovation. And we realized, you know, in 30 minutes, you can really only scratch the surface. So for those of you that were not here, really, we focused a lot of some of the just procedural obstacles, both with entitlements and permitting, really related to the ability for affordable housing projects to move forward with both funding and construction, and the inflexibility of some of those processes, particularly on the permitting and struggles to get to both ready to issue permits and TCO and certificates of occupancy, as well as on the planning and entitlement side and the necessity of having entitlement ready projects in order for projects to move forward with funding, and then some of the inflexibility of that. We also touched a little bit, and in listening to the opening session, both for comments from Roger and from the mayor's office, really about the granular issue, product and things that department where you don't have plan checkers and staffing that really understand some of this more creative product and all the challenges that results in, and we're very much be a bitch session about all the things that are wrong about the city, but to really use this group today to come up with some specific concrete items related to policy and streamlining the permitting and entitlement processes that we can provide back to AIA to provide back to the city that can help the process particularly. So we're not really focused on product here, we're focused on process. So with that, I think we actually wanted to start today with thoughts or questions from the group rather than us talking about the things that we've been talking about, just to see what kind of suggestions, ideas, and or challenges some of you have that we can use specifically to streamline and make the press better and more efficient at the cities. So I'll open that up, and if it's dead silence, then we have a plan B. But I have to be able to see hand raises somewhere.
Is this large enough, or should I zoom it in?
You should zoom it in.
Yeah, okay.
I have something that I would like to add to that.
Sure.
One of the things that isn't well appreciated by anybody outside of the system of producing these units for permanent supportive housing in particular, is that the arcaneness of the financial process that you have to go through to get these units subsidized as deeply as you need to is extremely prohibitive. And unless you've been through it before, for a new person to go through this without having been through the process in the past is just amazing to me that anyone would even attempt to understand it. But one of the problems that we have is getting property under control for a sufficient long enough period to get through this permitting and financial morass that you have to go through to get the money together to build these units. And I just say that as a general comment because many of the people on the planning side don't know the kinds of issues and troubles that you have to go through to get that financing together. And many people on the financing side have no patience for people that aren't ready to go and have been through the planning process. And so there's a whole area for education there between the players in the planning department and in the financial departments of HCID and HCD and the other people that are involved in the financing of these projects. And it's just very difficult to get through one of these construction programs.
Agreed. And that's probably a good segue to the one thing that we were going to kind of kick off to suggest, which is specifically because of the requirements for funding. We think that, not just the city of Los Angeles, but county and every other city that is focusing on affordable housing needs to have very specific and reliable timelines associated with an expediting program, so that when an affordable housing project is going into either a planning process or a plan check process, they can have the surety that they need to know that they will have implements by date and or permits by Y date, so that they are able to apply for the funding they need. Because over and over and over again, I'm sure many of you have experienced the same thing. There is a mad rush at the end to either get entitlement ready or planning ready because of delays that happened that had nothing to do with the team, and they were all on the city side in one way or another, and somebody misses a funding round and it gets delayed 6 months or a year to the next funding round. And we want to try and avoid that issue, particularly in a crisis time, and we're trying to accelerate the pace of production. And the last thing that should happen is that somebody misses a funding round because the city was non-responsive. And so we wanted to make sure that when we're suggesting things like expediting, that along with that come very defined timelines for processing on both sides, and that there's an understood performance deadline by planning, engineering, public works, building, DWP, and all the departments as part of that process. They all have mayor's mandates to expedite, but they're very open-ended.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so, and they're very open-ended. So
I think the one other thing that we came up as a solution to helping that, other than setting standard timelines for everyone in their turnarounds, is this idea of a project shepherd, somebody who helps you through the project, ideally appointed from the mayor's office, helps you from beginning to end to help all the, then they probably need more than one of these with all the affordable housing we really need to build. Helps you from beginning to end to help you when you get to any of those sticking points with certain departments that are, you know, at ends with each other.
Mark, good morning. This is Gio. Can I
Morning,
piggyback on that comment? Mark, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Gio here. I want to piggyback on that because I wanted to make a general comment as well. Nothing really specific, but for me, you know, the question about, you know, what can the city planning and building and safety do to streamline, you know, the affordable housing production, it needs to start with a fundamental question, which is that there has to be a cultural shift. There has to be a cultural shift in the way the city operates, because there are so many ordinances, so many assembly bills, and they're all geared towards improving the process and improving the production of affordable housing, which are all great intentions. But if you don't have everybody at the city marching along the same line, it's going to be an impossible task. And right now, I'm going to give you an example to illustrate that point, is that, you know, we're creating projects that are actually good solutions. They're very creative solutions, and we get a lot of resistance because the plan checkers are going by the code, and they're going by the strict letter of the code, and they're not understanding what we're trying to achieve. For example, we have a project where we're being urbanistically sensitive, where we're putting the driveway in the alley, and we're getting feedback. It says, no, the alley has to be on the street. You have to have a curb cut, which is totally against everything that people try to do. We're trying to create a better pedestrian quality. We're trying to minimize curb cuts, but because the code says that, they cannot think beyond that, and so we're getting resistance. That's just an example. You know, if we had a cultural shift internally, also in the sense that HHH projects, for example, are a high priority, and a plan checker working on an HHH project needs to understand that that is the highest priority. Again, another example, we have a plan checker where for weeks we've been trying to get in touch with him, and it took a phone call to their supervisor to basically get his attention. And the supervisor basically emailed back and said, you need to make this a priority because it's an HHH project, right? That's what I mean by cultural shift. So for me, that's like fundamental to all these discussions, that there has to be a way to send, that everybody has to get the memo. And right now, not everybody has the memo.
Absolutely.
Maybe, hi, David, hang on one second. So for anyone that wasn't in the session yesterday, I actually kicked off our session by saying that we have more streamlining, more incentivization coming out of the state now for housing in regulations and C policy and whatever. So if we have the most permissive regulatory environment to allow this product, why is it taking so long? Right? That's the fundamental crux of what we're all dealing with. And Gio, you're absolutely right. There are issues with the priority not being understood by all. But in a world where the state is basically saying that these projects are by right, why aren't the cities processing them by right? There's a disconnect that we are trying to reconcile, you know, through this and other policy measures and through housing. Sorry, Dave, go ahead.
Oh, a couple of things. One is I don't see a way to put my hand up here. So on my screen, I don't know if anybody else is experiencing the same thing.
I don't know how to either.
I don't know. Just
I lost the chat box.
Unmute yourself and unmute yourself and jump in as you need to.
Okay, so the my question addressing what John brought up about finance, and you know, this has always been a big problem. So has anybody developed any kind of software that might make this easier for everybody in terms of the, you know, all the overlapping, conflicting requirements, or the opposite, that, you know, there's so many separate requirements in putting together a package?
I don't know that anyone really has. I think that there's a number of parallel efforts depending upon what your priority is. I know there's another session on that's talking about reconciling the requirements of the various agencies, because what the city may require versus what require and how you reconcile packages.
Yeah.
I know that our office does a lot of in trying to roadmap out processes and procedures and requirements, because that's why we're hired to help all of the developers and the architects navigate the city so that none of you have to do it. So we have a number of resources that we use, but at the end of the day, no, there really is no singular road on how to do this. And most of it is because the product is so very different. And everything is still, at the end of the day, regulated by health and safety. And so the building code is still going to prevail over all, and fire trumps all, as we all say, right? Doesn't matter, what the fire department wants is always going to supersede anything else. And so we're still in that world where we have to be responsible and build safe product and safe homes for people to live, right? And marrying that with the world of creativity is really the hard part, because the building codes aren't caught up. And that was a lot of what was alluded to this morning.
So what we've done in our office with all these different project requirements is just created an Excel spreadsheet, and each column is a different entity, and we've listed them all. Now we can take that from project to project, and NOFAs change twice a year, so we update those every time too. But it's a good way of trying to find, and then in that spreadsheet also identifying what the most restrictive component of a certain line item is. But yeah, there's no software. I don't know if they could.
It seems like a shame that every firm has to do this, on its own. It just seems so redundant.
Yeah,
it is. I mean, and as an example, sorry, I have children around here too. Okay, sweetie, not now. So we're in the process of putting together a flow chart or something related to housing and relocation. And I happened to mention this to someone at HSID, and they said, "Sounds great. Could you send it to me when you're done? We'd love to see that." And I just went, okay, so it is incumbent upon us that, those of us in the professional world who are dealing with this, to sort of build our own roadmaps to help the clients and help because it's not going to come the other way, because as we said, the city is reactionary. But if we can provide them some concrete tools, to assist efforts like the mayor's office to help streamline, things through, like the housing update that's going on is probably the singular biggest opportunity right now. Several of us, even in this group, are on that task force. So we're trying to take this and be proactive about with solutions that are manageable, right? Because we're not, that systemically changing things is what needs to happen. We know our world doesn't work that way. So what can we do that doesn't result in systemic changes but helps the system, I think, is what we're trying to establish.
One of the difficulties that we had recently was we had in one of our hub areas, we had a site that was going to accommodate 4 different projects. And each of the 4 projects was on a different track financially. We were pursuing one set of grants and loans for one project and another set for another project. And 2 of the 4 were fairly well along in that, and the other 2 were further out. But the planning department wanted the same level of detail for each of the 4 projects before they'd considered the zone change and the community plan amendment that was necessitated by the property. And so there was little tolerance for us not knowing the level of detail about those projects that were further along out there than the ones that were relatively sure of in terms of the financial resources that we're going to have to build it. And so we had to guess as to what the downstream projects were going to look like based on the most likely financing scenario, which we haven't even yet perfected for those projects. And so there's just an inconsistency between the planners and the financial people as to when you're going to know what about the project.
Right,
Agreed.
so I think,
There's
yeah.
a huge inconsistency in within department in and of itself, and I think that's one of the things we're trying to promote change on, is have people designated in your department for affordable housing, so you're not getting somebody new, and the answers are consistent, and train these people and have a clear protocol for this stuff.
And knowledgeable.
Correct. I know this isn't on our list and we didn't really talk about it. There was a whole discussion this morning about modular for, not on video, so it's not people can raise hands, but right now most of the permanent housing is moving towards modular because of the cost of construction. And there's also a disconnect between the approval process at the and the local approval process, and the city won't move forward permitting until it's signed off on their plans. And it's a way that we can create a streamlined approval process for modular now that that's becoming sort of par for the course, so that everybody doesn't have to reinvent the wheel on every project. That would be extremely efficient, is getting it city approved, so you don't have to go through the dual approval process and then slow down.
I think
this
is Olivia. This is Olivia. I work with Dana at 360 as well. I think a lot of these things sound like they could be solved pretty easily by just centralizing them in general, which is something that I think that AIA, although we're not, Dan and I aren't members, we interact with architects very often, but AIA as an organization has the ability to lobby for, because a lot of these are just they're not code changes necessarily, they're just reorganizations within the city, and people like Theodora in the mayor's office and others are easy contacts to make. Yesterday Sean Spear from HSID was on providing suggestions as well. And it's not that these ideas don't exist already, but they just need to be expanded. They need to be more than one person in the mayor's office, or more than one plan checker in building and safety. They need to be entire teams of people. So in terms of solutions, I think those are just, recommendations that have to make their way from AIA or another organization to the city in a powerful way, because they're all very easily doable. And to go back to someone's comment about the centralization of funding sources and software, or something that could exist to make those funding applications easier. There actually was a bill going through the the California Assembly, that looks like it died in March, but it was meant to actually fund the creation of a software that would centralize every or most of the funding sources available in California. And so again, that's one of those things that was in motion, and now I'm looking at the legislative track right now, and just didn't move forward. But that requires people like us and organizations to advocate for those things, and to get in touch with people who are willing to listen, like Scott Wiener and other politicians that have the power to put these things forward and know that they have backing behind them. So I guess it won't happen this year, but it could happen, next year.
I'd also like, go ahead. Oh, I was going to add that most of our conversation in this chat room has been focused on the city of LA. And we've heard this morning from the mayor's office some of the things they're doing to facilitate the process. But my comment is that the city of LA is not the only game in town, so to speak. Looking at the county as a whole, there are 88 cities within the county of Los Angeles, and the city of LA is just one. And many of the smaller cities, from my experience, have much more responsive reactions to submittals, and a more responsive process for permitting than the city of LA, which is a much larger bureaucracy. So I would throw that out, that some of the smaller cities in the county are able to process projects more expeditiously than the city. And part of our role, I think, is to promote communication among different building departments and planning departments on what some of those more progressive cities are doing. And I'll leave it at that.
No, that's absolutely correct. And, you know, for all of the issues in other jurisdictions, you know, places like Santa Monica have actually been one of the leading jurisdictions on just really helping to move these forward because of that priority. The County of Los Angeles yesterday had their interim supportive housing, their interim housing and shelter ordinance to regional planning to finally get that passed, and in that came significant lining. I was on the task force also at the county. One of the things that we were advocating heavily for was to waive their site plan review process, so that they didn't have to go through, you know, unnecessary entitlements for what were effectively temporary housing, and to allow that from a regulatory process. I don't get ultimated in, but we were advocating very heavily for, you know, some of that process reduction. And then just as a point of information as well, for those of you that are not active in the county, they have an inclusionary ordinance that's going before regional planning on August 4th. And as part of that also is streamlining. And then on the City of LA side, they are in the process of kicking off again, updating the density bonus ordinance that stated today. And those of us that are active on the lobbying side are going to be pushing very heavily again, as we do every time, like when TOC came up, to raise the thresholds for site plan review, particularly when you look at things like, right, in permanent supportive housing, most of the projects end up to be 64 units because of labor requirements and other issues that come up above 64. But if 64 kicks you into an entitlement process for something that would otherwise be by right, that becomes challenging. So we're going to try to also, right, advocate in terms of process to allow for more of these, I'll call small and mid-sized projects to happen by right. You know, a project like Prophet talked about this morning, that was on an 8,000 square foot, you know, it's a teeny tiny site. They have a ton of density in there, but something like that and the footprint of that development probably not that impactful, you know, or a way to eliminate unnecessary process going through that. So I think what we're also looking for in the last, I think, 5 minutes that we have, or 4 minutes, for those of you that are doing work in other cities, are there specific things that, you know, could be helpful to advocate across the board that we can then take into this paper?
I think you touched on a good point there too, Dan, in that, you know, once you go past certain thresholds, right, past 50 units, past 64, the process starts to get really more difficult. And we have clients that will just back off on the number of units on that. So the result of it is we're actually delivering less units because of these processes, because these clients, they know this pot of money is there and they've got to hit it in a certain time. So I can't go through this process. So I'm building 20 less units than I could.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of having an assigned person from the mayor's office would be very helpful. I couldn't have done the Enlightenment Plaza project as far as I've gotten it without the help of a very committed councilman there. And not everybody has that. And so
I think that our recommendation is that all cities, not just LA, right? Going back to Paul's comment, all cities have to prioritize the production of affordable housing because all cities and jurisdictions have arena requirement to meet, and every city and every jurisdiction should have a designated person responsible for prioritizing affordable housing and a designated person that they know that they can go to. For a smaller city, you know, we'll take West Hollywood or Culver or something, maybe they only need one person. someone like the county and the city of Los Angeles and Santa Monica probably could use a department, right? Scaled appropriately, but that all jurisdictions need somebody that understands the legislation, that understands the financing, that understands the timelines, and can help to navigate projects and design through the process, because they understand sort of from where we started this dialogue, what's necessary for financing and vice versa. So that's a universal requirement that I think we would like to make across the board for all cities.
I think that the residual resistance to being extremely helpful is that they'll be perceived as, you know, someone who
froze there.
Oh, I was thinking it was my internet.
Yeah, his video. I think his internet.
I was really happy for a second.
I think people are going to start logging back on into the main room.
Johnny's still frozen.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I am going to also type my email into the chat for anybody that has an interest in reaching out in the future, if I can find my chat box.
And if you guys want to, you know, you can create your own. I'm like the Whova promoter, I swear. But you can create additional meetings after this within Whova using their Zoom, or just having your own Zoom. So just another way for people to connect after this.
Thank you all for joining. I mean, we can keep talking while people are jumping in. It's all policy.
Yeah, you can.
Well, Dana, I would just add along the lines that you were just saying and talking about all of the cities in LA County. Every city in LA County, and in fact, every city in the state will be going through the, not the state, but in Southern California, in the SCAG region, will be going through the housing element update process. And that is a real tipping point, or can be a tipping point in the ways that cities deal with development in general and affordable housing in particular, because they're going to have to show the capacity to accommodate their RHNA allocations. And so I would suggest that people follow that process, not just in the city of LA, but in the other cities throughout the county that they practice in. It's a way to exert some influence.
Maybe I'll use this opportunity just to share with people one of the other things that we've been talking through, and our office deals with this quite a bit, which is that all of the laws regarding density bonus and TOC, and even, you know, the legislation of the state, don't accommodate a guest room. They're all geared towards dwelling units, which means you have to have full cooking, and that excludes various kinds of housing, particularly some special needs housing. If you're targeting special needs population, accessible populations, then certain disabilities, senior and elder care, that, you know, providing physical cooking is a liability, and you can't qualify for any incentive programs if you don't have projects with a full kitchen. And for this group of architects, this is the abomination of that we're going through. We have 100% IDD, which is independent and developmentally disabled projects, the first in the city of Los Angeles that we're working on. We're really proud of it. These are people that they can't have gas or ovens in the units for all kinds of liability reasons. So they have a common kitchen, but we couldn't qualify for any density or any affordable housing or any density bonus as such. So they're building the building with kitchens, and they're going to unplug the ovens and the stoves and remove after C of O and just leave them non-working, because there was nothing we could do at the city level to allow them to be guest rooms, because then we couldn't use a density bonus program.
Again, it hinders density because now you can't do co-living, which allows you to get a lot more units into a lot.
Right. So we weren't a product, but in terms of policy, trying to expand the laws to acknowledge that housing is housing, whether it has a kitchen or not. It's still a place for somebody to live, and it's regulated by 30-day stays or longer. And you know, that could be incredibly helpful, you know, particularly for special needs populations.
Right. So we do have 100+ people coming back in the room, and I see Wade, you're back on. And Will is also back on. So if you guys want to restart the conversation.
Will, where do you want to go now?
Well, yeah, we have a few more minutes to wrap things up. And then just so that everyone knows, we'll do day 3 on Tuesday, July 28th at 8 in the morning. We have Alice Kim. But I wanted to just make sure that we are recognizing all of our partners in this program as well. So if we have any additional questions, we probably have about 5 or 10 minutes here.
I just wanted to say that the general feeling that you get, particularly in the city of LA, is that there's support for moving the program forward, but that the individual planners that are involved, the individual code people, may not see an easy way to help you through it. And if there was an ombudsman or someone that could help you navigate those kinds of issues when they come up, that would be very useful. But what's really needed is a change in the basic attitude within the departments that you know, they have the general knowledge that it's important to move these projects forward, but when it comes down to the specifics, they don't know how to do it or what exactly to do. And it's just a very, very difficult path.
I wanted to follow up on Michael's comment from yesterday about loving to be in this community of architects in Los Angeles. Making architecture is an act of hope, and everybody participating in these sessions wants to make our cities better. And like Michael, I love being part of you guys, and I love what we're trying to do. And I know it seems slow and painful, but I think we're slowly making a difference. And if we keep going, we will see the city we want to have.
Wade, thank you so much. I think we should end our session today with a few words from Alice Kim, who's going to lead us in discussion on Tuesday, July 28th, and that program will end at 11. Alice, are you here?
I am. Can you all hear me? I have been really enjoying the discussions of the last 2 days, so I just want to say thank you, first of all. I think that the day 3, first of all, I just wanted to tell you that it's going to be ending at 11, not at 10:30, so that at the end of that session, we can actually go over, Michael and Wade actually can review the sort of action items that have come out of the breakout sessions, and we can actually all go away with something that Will has been telling us from the beginning is extremely important, which is not just going away and thinking, but actually having a list of things that we might each of us be able to do. So I think we've all had a lot of moments of inspiration from the last 2 days. I know I have. I've also seen a lot of frustration that all of us face in whatever role that we play. But at the same time, I agree, Wade, with what you just said, and with Michael's always optimistic and hopeful attitude as well, that this is an amazing community. We are problem solvers. We love puzzles. you know, we have a crisis at hand, and, you know, we really have to just kind of figure out how to continue to tackle it in the best way that we can and better ways. So, but again, we'll be ending at 11, and really the focus on day 3 will be on narratives and perception and how we all learn and how we all react. And so, you know, I think that the sort of subtext of narrative and perception has been present throughout the last 2 days. And so I think it'll be really interesting to frame some of the information that we'll be getting on Tuesday in the light of those themes. So we'll have people from, again, we'll have Amy Anderson from the city. We will have Kelly Bernard speaking about LASA's report on Blacks experiencing homelessness. We will have Doug Smith of the LA Times talking about the challenges he faces in educating the public, which actually includes all of us, on homelessness and what he's found over the last 5 years to be lessons. And from there, you know, we'll hopefully move on. So just want to say thank you and look forward to seeing you on Tuesday. And thank you, Wade, and thank you, Michael. It's been very inspiring. So.
Thank you, Alice. Wade, do you want to wrap it up with any closing remarks from any of the other speakers?
I already made my remarks, so does anybody else on my team want to finish up with anything?
I'd second your thoughts on working with the architectural community and the folks in this community that really see these problems and are willing to work through them. Wade, you're one of them, and you make all the difference.
Thank you, John. Well, with that, I think we've wrapped up our Q&A for the day, and I'll let everyone get on with their you know, Friday schedule. But I really truly appreciate everyone's support. We're gonna do a final round of thank you to our sponsors. Without our sponsors, we really wouldn't be able to do a program like this. So I want to big thank you to Wade and his team at KFA Architecture. Shimihara Visual, always wonderful to see you in your content that you're making. It's beautiful, it's inspiring. David Baker Architects, Ann Riggs, thank you so much for joining us. And then Egan Simon Architecture. And on Tuesday, we're gonna have a video showcasing their Arroyo Bridge Shelter that just came out. Thank you to the Architects Collective. Thank you to KFA again, Koenig Iceberg, HET, Steinberg Art, Rios, Mac Construction, Ralph Metcher Architects, Abode Communities Architecture, Cassette. Thank you, Daphne from Cassette, Torty Gallis and Partners, Mark Lyman, Lamont Architecture. Thank you, Mark. KTGY, McTeague. Thank you, Drew. HKS. Thank you to the wonderful team at HKS, and thank you for lending us Greg Varabian so many days in a row. This year is a wonderful day to really showcase the leadership of our president, Greg Varabian. And once again, thank you for JFAK, Alice Kim, and John Friedman and their team. So with that, I'll let everyone sort of, get back to work and join us again Tuesday morning.